You know that feeling when you walk into a room and everything seems normal until it suddenly isn't? That's exactly what happened to Lena that night. She almost didn't go. It was late, a little past 9:30, and she'd already changed into her soft gray sweater and tied her hair up the way she did when she thought no one would see her. But her friend Mara kept texting, insisting she come to the little get-together at her apartment. Lena finally sighed, grabbed her coat, and headed out. She told herself it would be simple, just a few friends, some warm lights, soft music, and the kind of laughter that makes the night feel a little easier. When she reached the apartment, everything matched that picture perfectly. The glow from the windows felt welcoming. She could hear voices, calm, cheerful, familiar. Mara opened the door with her usual sparkle of excitement. "There you are! I knew you'd come," she said, pulling Lita into the hallway before she could change her mind again. Inside, the atmosphere was exactly what Lena hoped for. A small group sat on the couch and carpet, passing around mugs of hot cocoa. Someone had lit a candle that smelled faintly like vanilla and pine. It felt warm, safe. But then, Lena noticed something she wasn't prepared for. Sitting near the corner of the room, half in the light and half in shadow, was a man she never expected to see again. Elias. Her breath caught in her chest before she could stop it. She hadn't spoken to him in months. Not since that strange, unfinished conversation outside a cafe on a rainy evening, one that left both of them unsure where they stood. He looked up at the same moment, his eyes widening just a little. Not surprised, not annoyed, just aware. Lena forced herself to smile, hoping it looked casual, natural, but her heartbeat was anything but. Mara leaned in and whispered, "Oh, right. I should have told you he was coming. I forgot you two knew each other." Knew each other. That was one way to put it. Lena found a spot on a small armchair, trying to keep her posture relaxed. Everyone else kept chatting, stories about work, plans for winter, jokes about who made the worst cocoa. But she could feel Elias's presence like a quiet echo in the room. A few minutes later, Mara passed around a plate of soft, warm cookies. When Elias reached for one, his sleeve brushed Lena's hand. Just lightly, barely anything, but it sent a gentle shock through her. He murmured, "Sorry," and offered a small smile, a familiar one, the kind that stirred memories she thought she'd tucked away. "Don't worry about it," she said softly. She wished her voice didn't betray that tiny tremble. Someone turned up the music just a little, soft acoustic guitar, and the room fell into an easy rhythm again. But Lena wasn't really hearing any of it. She was too aware of the questions rising in her chest. Why was he here? Did he remember that last conversation? Did it still matter to him? The way it quietly still mattered to her? For a moment, she felt herself slipping back into old emotions, uncertainty, warmth, and something unspoken between them, something unfinished. Elias glanced toward her again, as if debating whether to say something. She looked away quickly, pretending to focus on her mug. But he stood up, and that's when everything inside her tightened. Was he leaving? Was he coming closer? Was he finally going to talk to her? He took a slow breath and stepped in her direction. The moment stretched, soft and tense, and Lena's heart whispered a single thought. This night might change something. You know how some moments feel louder than the room you're standing in? That's what Lena felt when Elias walked toward her. He moved slowly, almost cautiously, like he didn't want to startle her. The rest of the group kept talking, laughing softly, completely unaware of the quiet shift happening on the other side of the room. Lena straightened slightly in her chair, her fingers tightening around her warm mug. She tried to look collected, but inside, her thoughts were a tangled mix of nerves and questions. Elias stopped just a step away from her. "Hey," he said, gently. It was simple, soft, but it hit her harder than she expected. "Hi," she replied, hoping her voice wouldn't crack. He glanced around the room. "Do you mind if I sit?" he asked, pointing to the small empty spot beside her on the arm of the couch. She nodded. "Go ahead." When he sat, there was just enough space between them to keep things polite, yet not enough to stop the quiet pull of old familiarity. A moment passed before he spoke again. "I didn't know you'd be here," he admitted. "Same," she said. "Mara forgot to mention it." He let out a tiny breath, almost a laugh. Mara forgets a lot of things. Lena managed a small smile. The tension eased just a little, though her heartbeat stayed stubbornly fast. For a few seconds, neither of them said anything. They simply listened to the soft music and the murmur of distant conversation. It wasn't awkward silence, just uncertain, like both of them were choosing their next steps carefully. Finally, Elias turned toward her. "That day at the cafe," he began. Her chest tightened instantly. She'd wondered if he remembered. She'd wondered even more if he planned to bring it up. "You left so suddenly," he continued quietly. "I didn't know if you wanted space or if I said something wrong." Lena swallowed. "It wasn't you," she said. "I think I just didn't know what to say. Everything got confusing so fast." He nodded, his expression softening. "I get that. It was confusing for me too." She glanced down at her hands. "Maybe we just lost the moment," she whispered. Elias stared at her for a long second, long enough that she felt the weight of his attention. "Maybe we didn't," he said carefully. The words warmed her more than the cocoa ever could. She didn't look up right away. She didn't trust her face to stay calm. Across the room, Mara called out something about a board game. Someone laughed. A couple of people started gathering on the carpet. The atmosphere shifted again, light, playful, completely opposite of the quiet tension between Lena and Elias. He leaned slightly closer, just enough for his voice to reach her without anyone else hearing. "If you want," he said, "we can talk, really talk, after everyone leaves." Lena's breath caught, not because she felt pressured, but because something in his tone felt sincere, steady, hopeful. She finally lifted her eyes to his. "What would we talk about?" she asked softly. He offered a small, almost nervous smile. "Whatever we didn't finish that day." Her chest fluttered at the thought. A part of her had waited months for exactly this. Another part feared what the conversation might reveal. Before she could answer, Mara called her name. "Lena, come join us." Lena hesitated. The moment was delicate, and she didn't want to break it too quickly. Elias noticed the conflict on her face. He stood, slowly, and nodded toward the group. "Go," he said, gently. "We don't have to rush the rest." There was something kind in the way he said it, something patient. She rose from her chair and walked toward her friends, but she felt his gaze follow her, steady, warm, quietly wondering. And as she knelt on the carpet beside Mara, Lena realized something she hadn't expected to feel tonight. She was ready to hear whatever he wanted to say. But she didn't know if she was ready for what it might mean. And when she glanced back at him briefly, Elias was already watching her, like he felt the same mix of hope and fear. You ever feel like time slows down even while everything around you keeps moving? That's what the next hour felt like for Lena. She sat with the group, laughing when everyone laughed, listening when someone told a story about burning a casserole, nodding at all the right moments. But her mind wasn't really there. It kept drifting back to Elias. Every time she looked up, she found him in her peripheral vision. Sometimes he was listening to someone talk. Sometimes he was sipping cocoa. Sometimes he was just quietly lost in his own thoughts. But every so often, their eyes would meet, accidentally, then suddenly not so accidentally. And each time it happened, something gentle but undeniable stirred between them. By the time the clock crept toward 11, people began gathering their coats. Someone mentioned an early morning shift. Someone else apologized for leaving first. One by one, the little gathering grew thinner. Mara hugged each friend at the door, making them promise to visit again soon. The soft music kept playing, but the room felt different now. Quieter, softer, carrying the faint buzz of unfinished business. Lena stood to help clean up the empty mugs. Elias was already lifting a few from the table. Their hands brushed again. That same tiny jolt. Both of them paused, just for a breath. "You okay?" Elias asked gently. She nodded. "Yeah, just thinking." "What about?" She hesitated, then offered the safest truth she could. "Tonight." His eyes warmed a little. "Me too." They carried the mugs to the kitchen, walking side by side. Mara passed through behind them, humming as she gathered napkins and tapped her foot to the music. When Lena placed the mugs in the sink, she felt Elias stop beside her. The moment stretched. Quiet. Careful. Hopeful. "You said earlier," he began softly, "that things got confusing that day." He began softly. She nodded, not turning to look at him yet. "They did," she said. "Everything between us was almost something, and I think I got scared of where it might go." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he stepped a tiny bit closer, just close enough for her to feel the warmth of him. "Lena," he murmured, "I never wanted you to feel pressured. I just didn't know how to explain what I was feeling without risking everything." She finally looked up at him. "What were you feeling?" He held her gaze for a long moment, as if choosing his words carefully. "I cared about you," he said. "I still do. And I didn't want to mess it up by saying something too soon." Her heartbeat softened, but sped up at the same time. "So you pulled back?" "So I hesitated," he corrected gently. "And then you walked away, and I didn't know if it meant stop or wait." She exhaled slowly. "I didn't know either." For the first time all night, his smile was a little sad. "But you're here now." Before she could answer, Mara called from the living room, "I'm heading down to walk Jamie to her car. Be back in a few." And just like that, Mara and the last remaining guest slipped out, leaving the apartment door clicking softly behind them. The room fell into a quiet stillness. Lena and Elias stood alone in the kitchen, surrounded by the soft glow of warm lights and the faint scent of vanilla. She felt the weight of the moment settle gently between them. "I guess," Elias said quietly, "we finally have time to talk." Lena swallowed, her throat suddenly tight in that emotional, overwhelming way that always caught her off guard. "What if talking changes things?" she whispered. His voice softened. "What if not talking changes them even more?" She didn't move. Neither did he. The world outside the window seemed impossibly still. The hum of the fridge was the only sound between them. Lena drew a slow breath. "Elias, what is it that you want to say to me?" He stepped closer, just one careful, steady step, and with a look that held months of unsaid feelings, he opened his mouth to speak. But then, the apartment door handle turned, footsteps entered, Mara's voice drifted in from the hallway. And Lena felt her heart stop for a second. Whatever Elias was about to tell her, it would have to wait. You know that moment when something important is about to be said, and then life interrupts at the worst possible time? That's exactly what happened. Mara walked back in with her usual energy, completely unaware of how close Elias had been to confessing something Lena wasn't sure she was ready or not ready to hear. "Okay," Mara said cheerfully, dropping her keys into a bowl. "Who wants leftover brownies?" Lena stepped back instinctively, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Elias did the same, but his expression held a quiet frustration. Polite, calm, but unmistakably real. He didn't want to lose the moment any more than she did. Mara glanced between them. "You two look serious. Everything okay?" Lena forced a small smile. "Just talking." "Oh, well, don't let me interrupt," Mara said, already wandering toward the kitchen. But the moment had shifted too much. The room felt full again, full of chatter, full of distraction, full of everything except the quiet space they needed. Elias looked at Lena. A silent question. A silent invitation. "Do you want to step outside for a bit?" he asked, softly. Her breath caught. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't rushed. It was gentle, careful, like he was leaving her every chance to say no. But she didn't want to say no. She nodded. "Yeah, let's go." They slipped on their coats and stepped into the hallway. The apartment door closed softly behind them, muting Mara's cheerful humming. The hallway was quiet, lit only by warm overhead lamps. Their footsteps echoed gently on the floor as they walked to the small outdoor balcony at the end of the hall. When they stepped outside, cool night air brushed against Lena's face. The city around them was calm, with distant lights blinking like slow, steady stars. It felt peaceful in a way the living room couldn't. Elias took a breath and leaned against the railing, giving her space while still staying close. "Lena," he said, his voice low but steady, "I've wanted to talk to you for a long time." She wrapped her arms lightly around herself, the cool air mixing strangely with the warmth rising in her chest. "I've wanted to talk to you too," she admitted. He looked at her, really looked at her, with that same gentle focus that always made her nervous and safe at the same time. "That day at the cafe," he began, "I was trying to tell you how I felt, but I hesitated, and when you got overwhelmed, I thought giving space was the right choice." He paused. "It didn't feel right, but I didn't want to push you." Lena swallowed. "I didn't mean to walk away the way I did. I just didn't know what to do with everything in my head. It felt too sudden." "I know," he said softly. "That's why I didn't chase after you. I didn't want to make it worse." She stepped closer without realizing it. "Did you ever stop wondering about it?" she asked. His eyes softened in a way that made her chest ache. "No," he said honestly. "I wondered every day." The wind brushed between them, carrying a quiet tension that felt warm instead of cold. Lena's voice lowered. "What were you trying to tell me back then?" Elias looked down for a moment, gathering his thoughts. When he lifted his eyes again, they held something steady and unmistakable. "I liked you," he said, "more than I planned to, more than I expected to. And I didn't know how to say it without sounding like I was asking you for something you weren't ready to give." Her breath shook slightly, not in fear, just emotion, honest emotion. "And now?" she whispered. He stepped closer, slowly, giving her time to pull away if she needed. She didn't. "Now," he said quietly, "I still feel the same, maybe even more. But I'm not telling you this to get an answer tonight. I just want you to know the truth." Lena felt something warm bloom in her chest, soft, overwhelming, but gentle enough to hold. She looked at him, her voice barely above a breath. "I never stopped wondering about you either." He froze slightly, not in fear, but in surprise. Hope flickered in his eyes, careful and bright. Before either of them could speak again, the balcony light flickered. A cold gust swept through, brushing lightly against her hair. The moment felt delicate, like something beautiful trying to form. Elias exhaled softly. "Lena, what does that mean for us now?" She wished she had the answer. She wished she knew exactly what to say. But all she had was a feeling, and feelings were harder to name at night. The door behind them suddenly clicked open. Mara's voice drifted out. "Hey, are you two freezing out here? Come back in." Lena and Elias both turned slightly, caught between the warmth inside and the fragile honesty hanging in the air. The moment wasn't lost, just paused. And Lena felt it. Something important was waiting just on the other side of whatever she chose next. You know how some choices feel small on the surface, but deep down you know they'll change everything? That's exactly what Lena felt as she stood on the balcony, the cold air curling around her while Elias waited quietly for her response. Mara's voice drifted from the doorway again. "Guys, seriously, it's freezing. Come inside." Lena glanced back at the warm glow of the apartment, then looked again at Elias. He wasn't rushing her. He wasn't pushing her. He was simply waiting, steady, patient, hopeful in a quiet way. And that made her decision easier. "Give us a minute," Lena called to Mara. Mara blinked in surprise, then grinned knowingly. "Oh, okay. I'll just pretend I didn't hear anything." The door closed again. Elias exhaled softly, a cloud of white in the cold air. "Thank you," he murmured. Lena shook her head gently. "No, thank you, for being honest." He stepped a little closer, careful as always. "Lena, I meant everything I said, but I know it's been months. I know things got messy. I know feelings can fade or change, so whatever you're feeling now, you don't have to force anything." She looked at him, really looked, and the months of confusion suddenly felt clearer. "I'm not forcing anything," she said quietly. Elias held her gaze, waiting. The balcony was silent, except for the faint hum of the city below. Cold air brushed their sleeves. A soft wind tugged lightly at her hair. "I walked away that day," Lena said slowly, "because I wasn't ready. And maybe I needed space. Maybe I needed time. But the truth is," she paused, steadying her voice, "I never stopped thinking about what you were trying to say." Elias's expression softened in a way she'd never seen before. Relief, hope, warmth, all tangled together. "And tonight," she continued, "seeing you again, it reminded me that the moment wasn't lost, just paused." He let out a shaky, quiet breath. "So, where does that leave us now?" Lena stepped closer, until their shoulders almost touched. She didn't rush the words. She wanted them to be honest. "I think," she said gently, "it leaves us with a second chance, if we want it." Elias blinked, his eyes warming with something tender and careful. "Lena, are you sure?" She nodded. "I'm sure. I want to try. Even if we go slowly, even if it's uncertain. I'd rather try than keep wondering." A soft smile tugged at his lips, small but full of meaning. "Then I'm here," he said quietly. "As slow as you need, as steady as you want." Her chest warmed at the words. Simple, steady, sincere. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They just stood beside each other on the quiet balcony, breathing the cold night air, letting the truth settle gently between them, like something fragile finally finding its place. After a long pause, Lena whispered, "Do you want to go back inside?" Elias glanced toward the door, then at her again. "With you," he said softly, "yes." They turned and walked back down the hallway, side by side. When they stepped into the warm apartment, Mara looked up from the couch with a dramatic eyebrow raise. "Everything? Good?" she asked, trying and failing not to grin. Lena felt herself blush. "Yeah," she said softly. "I think so." Elias nodded, with a quiet smile that didn't need any explanation. Mara's grin widened, but she didn't push. "Good," she said. "Brownies are still warm." The rest of the night wasn't dramatic, wasn't loud, wasn't filled with grand declarations or perfect moments. But it was warm, easy, filled with small glances and soft smiles, and a sense of something new gently beginning. By the time Lena finally left the apartment, Elias walked her to her car. Not because he had to, because he wanted to. At the curb, she turned to him. "Tonight felt different," she said quietly. "Different good?" he asked. She nodded. "Different, right." He smiled, the kind of smile she hadn't seen in months. Hopeful, honest, unguarded. "I'll talk to you tomorrow?" he asked. "Tomorrow," she agreed. And for the first time since that confusing day months ago, the idea of tomorrow didn't feel uncertain. It felt like a beginning. A soft, steady, hopeful beginning.